I had always considered myself a quiet achiever, someone who stayed in the background and did their work without seeking much attention. But in a corporate world where the loudest voice often won, I found myself constantly underappreciated, overshadowed by colleagues who seemed to thrive in the spotlight. And of course, there was my boss, Greg. He wasn't just your typical boss. He was the kind of manager who loved to belittle others, especially those who were quieter, more reserved. For him, power meant intimidation, and he used every opportunity to remind everyone who was in charge. The office was a high-pressure environment where performance was everything, and Greg made sure everyone knew that. I remember the first time I encountered his harshness. It was during a team meeting when I presented a new marketing proposal I had worked on for weeks. I had spent countless hours researching, organizing, and refining the presentation to make sure it was perfect. But when I showed it to the team, Greg barely looked at it. He didn't even make eye contact. Instead, he glanced at the slides for a few seconds, then turned to me with a scowl. "This is weak. You should have done better," he said flatly, his voice dripping with disdain. He didn't even offer any constructive feedback, just criticism, and not even the kind that helped me improve. His words hung in the air, suffocating any confidence I had. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, silently judging, some trying to hide their amusement. It wasn't the first time Greg had humiliated someone in front of the team, but it was the first time I had been on the receiving end. At that moment, I realized something important. Greg was not interested in fostering talent. He was interested in maintaining control, keeping everyone beneath him so that he could feel powerful. I thought I would get used to it, that it would get easier. But every time he spoke to me like that, it chipped away a little bit more of my self-esteem. Days turned into weeks, and I kept my head down, doing my work as best I could. But Greg's treatment of me didn't change. I kept getting passed over for important projects. My ideas were ignored, and the little recognition I received felt empty. I began to dread going to work. I would wake up every morning with a pit in my stomach, wondering what new insult or rejection I'd face that day. It wasn't just the work-related issues. Greg's behavior started to leak into my personal life. He would comment on my appearance, my habits, my choices as though I owed him an explanation for everything. Once, when we were at a company happy hour, he laughed at my drink choice, an innocent, non-alcoholic beverage that I preferred. "What's wrong with you?" he mocked in front of the group. "Afraid to drink like everyone else?" His tone was cruel, and everyone around us laughed awkwardly, but no one stood up for me. No one ever did. But what really did it, what pushed me past my breaking point, happened one day during an all-hands meeting. It was the biggest presentation of the year. The company was pitching for a new contract with a global brand, and the stakes were higher than ever. I was tasked with putting together a marketing strategy for the pitch. I worked night and day for weeks, burning the midnight oil, often falling asleep at my desk. My personal life was completely non-existent, but I didn't care. I just wanted to prove myself. I remember walking into the meeting that day, confident that I had created something brilliant. I had every detail covered, from the initial market research to the detailed growth projections. This was going to be my moment to shine, or so I thought. Greg took the presentation, glanced over it quickly, and without missing a beat, started tearing it apart. "This is subpar. It doesn't meet our standards," he spat, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the screen. "You really think this is good enough to present to the client?" My stomach dropped. I was crushed. Here I had poured my heart into this project, and all I got in return was his ridicule. I could feel the sweat beading on my forehead as the room went silent. All of my colleagues stared at the floor, not wanting to make eye contact with me. I wanted to scream, to stand up for myself, but the words wouldn't come. Greg's sharp criticisms continued, each word cutting deeper than the last. At that moment, something shifted inside of me. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Suddenly, I could feel everything inside of me realign. All the anger, all the frustration that had been simmering below the surface for months, all the countless hours of silent suffering and the constant undermining, it was all crystal clear now. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't just angry. I was done. I was beyond the point of tolerating Greg's petty behavior and toxic leadership. I had been swallowed by his insecurities and belittlement for so long, but now it was over. I couldn't keep living like this anymore, constantly undervalued, ridiculed, and treated like I was invisible. I had endured this long enough. It felt almost surreal, the sudden clarity that flooded my mind. I wasn't going to let Greg's small-mindedness and insecurities dictate my future anymore. The realization hit me hard. I had the power to change this, and I was ready to take that power back. With my heart racing, I stood up and left the meeting room without a word. I didn't need to justify myself to anyone, not to Greg, not to my colleagues, not even to myself. I just walked out. My chest tightened with every step, but there was also a sense of liberation, as if each step away from that office was a step toward freedom. I didn't know what was next, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to make a change, and fast. In the days that followed, I didn't waste any time. I began planning my next move, carefully considering every possibility. I knew I couldn't stay in a job that continually broke me down, where I was constantly gaslight, where my every effort was met with disdain. I had to do something for myself, something that gave me control over my own future. But I also knew that if I just walked away without a plan, without a way to make this personal victory matter, I would be selling myself short. I had been so careful to keep everything under wraps. No one, not even my closest friends, knew what I had been working on in secret. For months, I had been quietly building something that was all mine, a business idea, something I could pour my passion into. It wasn't just a half-baked dream. It was a comprehensive entrepreneurial venture that merged my love for marketing with a desire to build something that could actually make a difference. I had kept it to myself, working tirelessly on weekends, late into the nights, tweaking every detail, refining every strategy. Every time Greg belittled me or ignored my contributions, I poured that pain into my project. Each time he dismissed me, it felt like fuel to the fire, driving me to prove him wrong. What Greg didn't know, and what he had failed to notice, was that I wasn't just a passive worker. I wasn't just a quiet employee in the corner of the office. I was quietly building an empire, preparing to rise above him, even if he couldn't see it coming. He thought I was meek, easily ignored. He thought I was content to stay invisible. But the truth was, I had been building something with every intention of taking control, of turning the tables. And more importantly, I had the skills, the knowledge, and the network to make it happen. It wasn't long before that silent work started paying off. Out of nowhere, I was approached by an investor who had seen the potential in my idea. After several meetings and a lot of hard work, I secured a deal to fund my startup. This wasn't some flash-in-the-pan project. It was a carefully crafted plan that had already begun to gain traction in the industry. This was real. This was my chance to leave the toxic, belittling environment behind and finally create something of my own, something that could rival Greg's company. The day I walked into Greg's office to tell him I was leaving was unlike any other. It felt like the first time I was truly in control of my own destiny. I walked in with a smile, one that felt genuine for the first time in a long time. Greg looked up from his desk, his usual arrogance evident in his posture. He didn't even look up fully when he spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "Got something to say?" he asked, clearly expecting me to be meek and apologetic. I handed him a folder containing the proposal for my new business, something I had worked on tirelessly in the shadows. I didn't need a dramatic speech. All I needed was to hand him the proof. "I'm leaving, Greg," I said, my voice calm and unwavering. "I've secured funding for my own venture, and I'm taking it to the next level." I'm done being a part of your toxic culture." His face, usually so composed and confident, paled as he flipped through the documents. For the first time, he was speechless. His shock was priceless. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had underestimated me, assuming I was just another quiet employee he could control. But now, I was the one with the power. I wasn't the person he thought I was. "You're leaving with this," he stammered, trying to regain his composure. "Yep," I replied coolly, savoring the moment. "And just so you know, I'll be taking that global client you turned down. I got a better pitch. Good luck with the rest of your team." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the office, the weight that had been bearing down on me for so long suddenly lifting off my shoulders. Every step away from Greg's office felt like a step closer to freedom. I had taken back control of my life, and nothing was going to stop me. The next few months were a blur, a whirlwind of new challenges and exhilarating moments. My startup took off faster than I ever expected. What started as a quiet, personal project became a force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, Greg's company, the one that had humiliated me and made me feel worthless, seemed to fade into the background. I wasn't looking back. I was too far ahead now. Greg reached out a few times, trying to reestablish contact, but by that point, I was already so far ahead that I didn't care. He had thought I was just another employee to overlook, someone he could easily dismiss. But he was wrong. The quiet person he had constantly undermined was now the one in charge, and he had no idea how to handle that. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the success, although those things were certainly gratifying. It was about taking control of my life. It was about reclaiming my power and proving to myself that I was capable of so much more than Greg ever gave me credit for. No longer was I the quiet, unnoticed employee. I had become the one in charge, the one with the vision, and that, more than anything else, was the real victory. It was my moment, and no one could take that away from me.